The press conference room at Kang Holdings' New York satellite office gleamed with chrome and glass. 50 journalists crowded the space, cameras trained on the podium where Kang Kyungrae Soh stood in a flawless charcoal suit, his expression carved from marble. His CFO, Choi Sang-wook, stood 3 feet behind him, the appropriate distance of deference in Korean corporate hierarchy. "Mr. Kang, is it true you're acquiring the historic building on Atlantic Avenue?" a reporter called out. Kyungrae Soh's hand tightened imperceptibly around the podium edge. "Kang Holdings is finalizing a strategic real estate acquisition to expand our urban tech initiative. Details will be announced December 31st. And the community center inside? The Urban Roots Living Archive?" A pause. "Too long," Sang-wook noticed. The cameras noticed. "All tenants will receive fair compensation," Kyungrae Soh replied, his English perfect but formal, shaped by years of international business. In the back row, a woman with luminous deep-toned skin and voluminous natural hair leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Selena Robinson, 44, wore an earth-toned linen blouse and a silver ring on her index finger, her mother's heirloom. She didn't raise her hand. She simply waited. When the conference ended, she approached him in the emptying hallway. "You're the buyer," she said. Not a question. Kyungrae Soh turned, extending his hand with automatic executive courtesy. Selena looked at it but didn't move. "Here, we start by listening, not negotiating." He lowered his hand, something flickering across his controlled features, surprise, perhaps, discomfort. "I came to make a fair offer, Ms. Robinson, Selena Robinson, founder and director of the archive you want to demolish." She tilted her head, studying him the way someone examines a damaged photograph, searching for what's been erased. "You don't want to buy a building, Mr. Kang. You want to erase a ghost." The silence sharpened. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Kyungrae Soh's jaw tightened, the muscle visible beneath his skin. "And how?" he asked, voice dangerously low. "Do you know that?" Selena smiled. Not warmth, but recognition. "Because I spend my whole life reading what people hide in sealed drawers." She reached into her canvas bag and withdrew an old envelope, yellowed paper, broken red seal. "I found this yesterday. Cataloging donations from Korean War veterans. It seems your family has roots in this building. Roots someone tried to forget." Kyungrae Soh took the letter with hands that trembled imperceptibly. The return address, written in faded Korean characters, made his breath catch. Kang Hyun-woo, 1952, Brooklyn, New York. He read the first lines. His face, trained through decades of corporate discipline to reveal nothing, cracked for just a second. Raw pain, confusion, fury. Where did this come from? "From the memory you want to demolish," Selena replied. And she left, her footsteps echoing down the corporate hallway, leaving him alone under the recessed lighting he preferred, because it cast no shadows. Some stories are priceless, and some debts cannot be paid with money. If you're already wondering whether he'll choose power or truth, hit subscribe, because this journey gets darker before it gets light, and you'll want to be here when 2 wounded souls discover that the hardest battles are the ones that lead us home. Kyungrae Soh didn't return to his hotel. Instead, he sat in the back of his company car, parked outside the archive building on Atlantic Avenue, staring at the letter under the dim interior light. The driver knew better than to ask questions. The letter was written in old-style Korean, the kind his grandfather might have used. "To the Robinson family and the community that took me in when I had nothing. I am returning to Seoul, but I leave part of my heart here. What you gave me cannot be repaid, only remembered." It was signed with a seal, the Kang family seal, the one Kyungrae Soh had seen in corporate documents and ancestral records. His phone buzzed. Sang-wook. "Hyung, where are you? The shareholders' call starts in 15 minutes. "Cancel it," Kyungrae Soh said. A pause. In their 20-year friendship, Kyungrae Soh had never canceled a shareholder's call. "Are you okay? I need you to find everything on Kang Hyun-woo, my great-grandfather." Start with 1952. Korea. New York. The war. Junseo. Do it now. He hung up. Outside, Christmas lights blinked on the archive building's facade. Red, green, gold. Junseo looked away. He hadn't celebrated Christmas in 10 years. Hadn't allowed himself to see lights, hear carols, acknowledge the date. December 25th was simply the day after December 24th, the night his younger brother Min-jae died because Junseo chose a conference call over a phone call. The memory hit him like always, sharp, unforgiving. Min-jae's face on his phone screen at 11 p.m., the Tokyo conference room, the executives watching. The choice that seemed so clear then, so devastating now. Busy. Call you tomorrow. Except, there was no tomorrow. Just a police report, a closed casket, and 10 years of punishing himself through work, expansion, control. He stepped out of the car into the cold December night. The archive's door was unlocked. Inside, warm light spilled from a community room where voices mingled. Caribbean accents, Spanish, Mandarin, English, and a dozen regional variations. Selena stood in the center of a circle of mismatched chairs, leading a group of elderly people, teenagers, families. Tell a memory no one has ever asked you about, she said softly. An 80-year-old Jamaican man spoke about arriving in Brooklyn in 1967, seeing snow for the first time, thinking the city was covered in sugar. His voice cracked when he described calling home to Jamaica, telling his mother about the miracle of winter. A Latina teenager laughed, remembering her grandmother's Spanglish warnings. Mija, don't trust boys who don't eat your cooking. And how she'd just introduced her girlfriend to her family using that exact test. A Korean woman in her 70s described hiding in a church basement during the war, how an American soldier shared his chocolate ration with her, how that single act of kindness made her believe in humanity again. Junseo stood in the doorway, invisible in his expensive suit, watching Selena transform the invisible into monuments. She moved with quiet authority, touching an elder's shoulder, laughing with a child, correcting a mispronounced name with gentle firmness. She was a curator of souls, and he'd come here to demolish her cathedral. She caught his gaze across the room, held it, didn't smile. After the circle ended, he found her in a hallway lined with framed photographs, black faces, Asian faces, Latino faces, white faces, all labeled with names, dates, stories. You came back, Selena said, not turning around. I want to know where you found that letter. In a box donated by the family of Pastor Jerome Washington. He's dying now. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He founded this archive 40 years ago because he believed memory is resistance. She finally faced him, and in the warm light, her eyes were the color of dark amber. The box had letters from Korean War veterans who stayed in Brooklyn after the armistice. Your great-grandfather's name was on 3 of them. Junseo's throat tightened. My family records say he went straight from Seoul to Busan during the war, then back to Seoul in 1953. There's no mention of New York. Convenient amnesia, Selena said. Or intentional erasure. Either way, the truth is here. In this building, the one you want to turn into a tech hub. He looked at the photographs, really looked. A Chinese family outside a laundromat, 1982. A Puerto Rican wedding, 1975. A group of Korean war brides holding babies, 1956. Each frame held a world, a story, proof that someone had lived and loved and mattered. I'm not trying to destroy anything, Junseo said quietly. I'm trying to build... Over graves, Selena interrupted, her voice sharp but not cruel. You're building over graves. These stories, Mr. Kang, are the only proof these people existed. When we close, they disappear, erased, just like your great-grandfather was erased from your family's official history. Junseo met her eyes. What do you want from me? Nothing you can buy, Selena said. And she walked away, leaving him surrounded by ghosts he hadn't known existed, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. Seoul. Kang Holdings headquarters. Glass tower, 63 floors, the family name etched in steel above the entrance. Junseo's office occupied the entire top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, minimalist furniture, temperature controlled to exactly 68 degrees. A single photograph sat on his desk. His younger brother, Min-jae, smiling at a college graduation Junseo had missed because of a merger negotiation. His mother, Kang Hye-jin, 70, sat across from him in a tailored pearl gray hanbok, her posture impeccable, her expression colder. She held a teacup with both hands, the traditional gesture of respect, but her words carried no warmth. "You're distracted," she said in Korean, the formality of her language reinforcing the hierarchy between them. "I'm handling the New York acquisition," Junseo replied in the same language, matching her formality. "You were supposed to close it by now." "The board is asking questions. Lee Da-eun is asking questions." Da-eun, the director of acquisitions, had been positioning herself as his successor for years, ruthlessly efficient, unencumbered by sentiment. "I need more time." Hye-jin set down her teacup with precision. For what? He couldn't tell her about the letter. She would dismiss it as irrelevant, a distraction from duty. Their family didn't discuss the past. They managed the future. There are community considerations. Community? His mother's voice was silk over steel. "You sound like your brother." He also cared too much about community. About people who couldn't help the company. And where did that get him? The wound opened, fresh as always. Min-jae had wanted to leave the company, start a non-profit for immigrant workers' rights. Hye-jin had refused, called it a betrayal of family legacy. Junseo had sided with their mother, told Min-jae to be realistic, to understand duty. The last conversation they'd had, 2 days before Christmas Eve, had ended with Min-jae saying, "You've become exactly what father wanted. I hope it's worth it." It wasn't. God, it wasn't. "I'll close the deal," Junseo said, his voice flat, mechanical. "By December 31st, or the board will vote." Hye-jin stood, smoothing her hanbok with practiced elegance. "And Junseo, stop going to that building. You're being photographed. The media is speculating. It's undignified for a man of your position." She left, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. Junseo sat alone in his glass tower, surrounded by the empire his family built on control, efficiency, and the erasure of inconvenient truths. The Han River glittered below, beautiful and indifferent. He pulled out the letter again, read it for the 20th time. "What you gave me cannot be repaid, only remembered." His phone rang. Sang-wook. "I found something." Kang Hyun-woo's name appears in U.S. immigration records from 1952. He entered New York in June, stayed until September 1954. Then he returned to Seoul, and the records go silent. 2 years, Junseo murmured. "He was here for 2 years. There's more. I found a death certificate. A woman named Althea Robinson. Brooklyn, 1954. The informant listed on the certificate is Kang Hyun-woo." Sang-wook paused. "Junseo, I think your great-grandfather delivered her baby. The dates match. She died in childbirth, and someone had to sign the paperwork. Robinson. Selena's last name." Junseo's pulse quickened. "Send me everything. Hyung, are you sure about this? The board is already questioning your commitment. If they find out you're investigating family history instead of closing deals, send it." He hung up and booked a flight back to New York, knowing he was choosing a mystery over certainty, a woman he barely knew over an empire he'd spent his life building. Maybe Min-jae had been right. Maybe it was time to become someone different. Selena found Junseo standing outside the archive at 6 a.m., holding 2 cups of coffee from the bodega on the corner. Steam rose in the cold December morning. She raised an eyebrow. CEOs don't usually do bodega runs. "I'm not here as a CEO, he said, handing her one. Black, no sugar, he'd noticed yesterday. I'm here because I think your ancestor and mine knew each other. She took the coffee, studying him over the rim. The man looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tie slightly crooked, a vulnerability he probably didn't know was showing. You could have emailed. I wanted to see your face when I told you. They sat on the building's front steps as the Brooklyn morning woke around them. Delivery trucks rumbling past, commuters hurrying to the subway, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery next door. A group of pigeons fought over a discarded bagel. Somewhere, a car alarm wailed and died. Kyungrae showed her the death certificate on his phone. Althea Robinson. Do you know the name? Selena's hand trembled slightly, coffee sloshing against the lid. The first crack in her composure he'd seen. My great-grandmother. She died giving birth to my grandmother. I never knew who helped deliver the baby. The family story just said, a kind stranger. She looked at him, something shifting in her eyes. Surprise, recognition, a door opening to possibility. Your great-grandfather was there when mine was born. Which means our families are connected, Kyungrae said quietly. Not by blood, by care. Selena's jaw tightened, the vulnerability closing as quickly as it had appeared. And you want to demolish the proof of that care. You see the irony, right? I see it. He set down his coffee, turning to face her fully. Selena, I spend my whole life managing things. Companies, acquisitions, risk assessments. I'm good at it. I'm good at looking at something and seeing its value in dollars, in quarterly returns, in shareholder satisfaction. He paused, searching for words he'd never had to articulate before. But sitting in that memory circle yesterday, listening to Mr. Park talk about chocolate and war and kindness, I realized I don't know how to measure what matters. Selena watched him, her expression unreadable. So you're having an existential crisis? Maybe. Yes. He laughed, self-deprecating. Is that pathetic? No. It's human. She sipped her coffee, her silver ring catching the early light. But Kyungrae, I can't be your awakening. I can't be the thing that makes you feel purposeful or less guilty about whatever you're running from. I have work to do. Real work. And I can't afford to be someone's redemption project. The words stung, because they were true. I'm not asking you to save me. Then what are you asking? To understand. To see what my great-grandfather saw. To know why he chose this place. These people. Enough to stay for 2 years when his family needed him back home. Selena studied him for a long moment, weighing something he couldn't name. Then she stood, coffee in hand. Come to the archive tonight. We're hosting a Christmas memory circle. If you can sit through it without checking your watch or your phone, without thinking about quarterly reports or board meetings, I'll show you the rest of the letters. I don't do Christmas, Kyungrae said, the automatic response. Neither did half the people in our circle, until they found a reason to. She walked inside, pausing at the door. 7 o'clock. Bring food if you can. We're potluck. The door closed behind her, leaving him on the steps with a choice he hadn't expected to face, and a growing certainty that this woman, fierce, guarded, absolutely certain of her purpose, was going to change everything. That night, Kyungrae sat in his hotel room at the Mandarin Oriental, staring at his phone. 17 missed calls from the Seoul office, 12 emails from Daeun marked urgent, 3 messages from his mother, each one colder than the last, and a single text from Sang-wook. The board meeting is set for the 31st. If you don't close the NY deal, they'll vote you out. This is serious, Hyung. He could fix this. Call a meeting. Offer Selena double the market value. Triple. Set up a new archive in a different building. Newer, better equipped. Solve it the way he solved everything. With money, strategy, control. The Kang way. But he kept thinking about the memory circle. About the 80-year-old man crying over snow. About the teenager's laughter. About Selena's voice when she said, "Memory is resistance." He kept thinking about his great-grandfather, who'd left behind empire and expectation to deliver a baby for a black family in 1950s Brooklyn, who'd stayed 2 years when duty called him home after 2 months. What had Kang Hyun-woo seen that was worth that sacrifice? His watch read 6:47 p.m. The Christmas event started at 7, sang. He had 13 minutes to decide who he wanted to be. At 6:58, he walked into a Korean market in Midtown, grabbed ingredients he barely remembered how to prepare, and made it to the archive at 7:14, slightly breathless, carrying a container of store-bought kimchi and rice cakes that were probably the wrong kind. Selena saw him from across the room. She didn't smile, but she nodded toward an empty chair in the circle. The room had been transformed. Candles on every table, strings of lights overhead that made him flinch internally, the smell of home-cooked food from a dozen cultures layering the air. Jerk chicken, collard greens, rice and beans, plantains, dumplings, something that smelled like cumin and coriander. He sat, didn't check his watch, turned his phone completely off. For 2 hours, he listened. A Haitian mother talked about fleeing the 2010 earthquake, arriving in Brooklyn with nothing but a photo album she'd carried through devastation. This archive had helped her find records of her grandfather's immigration in 1968, connecting her to roots she'd thought were destroyed. She wept as she described showing her daughters that they came from survivors, that their history didn't start with trauma. A Chinese teenager spoke about his grandfather, who'd entered through Angel Island in 1952, facing interrogations and detention that left him silent about his past for 50 years. The archive held his immigration papers, the questions he'd been asked, the months he'd waited in limbo. "I understand him now," the boy said, "why he never talked about it. But I also understand he survived, and that matters." A Korean woman Jun Seo's age, maybe a year older, described finding her adoption records here after 40 years of searching. She'd been told her birth parents didn't want her, that she'd been abandoned at an orphanage. The records showed something different. A teenage mother who'd left a letter, jewelry, photographs, begging the agency to tell her daughter she was loved. "This archive gave me back my mother," the woman said, her voice breaking. "Not the fantasy mother I'd imagined. The real one. Complicated and young and scared and loving me anyway." Jun Seo didn't check his watch once. He forgot there was a watch to check. After the circle, Selena brought him to the archive's back room. Shelves floor to ceiling, boxes labeled by decade, country of origin, family name. The room smelled like old paper and time, dust and preservation. She pulled down a box marked Korean War Era, Robinson Family, and handed him a stack of letters tied with string. "Your great-grandfather wrote to my great-grandmother every month for 2 years, Selena said quietly. He helped her with rent when her husband left. Brought medicine when she was sick with pneumonia. Taught her basic Korean so she could communicate with the other war brides in the neighborhood. There were 5 families on this block alone. When she went into labor early, he was the one who carried her to the hospital in his arms, because the ambulance wouldn't come to this neighborhood fast enough. She untied the string carefully, reverently. He held my grandmother for the first 3 hours of her life while Althea was in surgery. The doctors told him she wouldn't make it. He refused to leave. And when she died, he stayed another week, helping the family with funeral arrangements, paperwork, finding a wet nurse. He mourned her like family. Jun Seo's hands shook as he took the letters. They were written in Korean, formal but warm, the handwriting elegant. "Dear Mrs. Robinson, I hope this letter finds you in good health. The winter is hard, but your community has shown me that family is not only blood. It is choice. It is showing up. It is remembering that we are all far from home, and home is what we build together." Another letter. "The baby is strong. She has your eyes and your husband's stubbornness. I held her while you slept today. She gripped my finger and would not let go. This is what we survive for. These small hands that hold the future." And the last one, dated September 1954. "I am called back to Seoul. The family business cannot wait longer, but I leave my heart here, with people who taught me what my ancestors forgot, that wealth without care is just money, and money without memory is dust. If my descendants ever find this, know that the Kang family was built on more than conquest. It was built on kindness we received and failed to repay. Remember that. Please. Why did he go back to Korea? Junseo asked, his voice rough with unshed tears. The last letter says his father demanded it. The family business needed an heir present, not distant. Duty called. Selena's expression softened, but she didn't look away from the truth. He didn't want to leave, but he did. Just like you're about to. Junseo looked up sharply. I'm not leaving. You're a CEO of a chaebol, Mr. Kang. Men like you don't stay. You visit, you observe, you feel briefly guilty. Then you go back to the world that makes sense, where everything has a price and feelings are inconvenient distractions from profit margins. The assessment was brutal and not entirely wrong. But Junseo stood, the letters still in his hands, and said with more conviction than he'd felt in years, You don't know me. I know your watch costs more than most people here make in a year, Selena said, her voice gentle but unyielding. I know you've checked your phone 6 times since you sat down, even though you think I didn't notice. I know you came here because you're curious, maybe even guilty. But curiosity and guilt don't change systems. They just make you feel better about participating in them. The truth landed like a blow. Junseo set the letters down carefully, precisely, using the control he'd perfected over decades to keep from falling apart. What do you want me to do? I want you to choose, Selena said. And now there was something else in her voice. Not anger, but challenge. Invitation even. Not negotiate, not strategize, not find a middle ground where everyone feels good and nothing changes. Choose. The building or the truth. Your mother's approval or your own integrity. The empire or the memory. She moved toward the door, then stopped. And Junseo, I need you to know, I'm not doing this to fix you. I'm doing this because my great-grandmother deserves to be remembered by the family that mattered when it counted. Whether you're part of that legacy or just another person trying to erase it is your decision, not mine. She left him alone in the archive room, surrounded by 100 years of voices that refused to be erased, holding letters from a man who'd made a choice Junseo was only beginning to understand. He stayed until 4 a.m., reading every letter, every receipt, every scrap of paper his great-grandfather had left behind. And slowly, painfully, he began to see what Kang Hyun-woo had seen, that some debts can only be repaid by living differently. Junseo didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in the archive until dawn broke over Brooklyn, reading letters and trying to understand how his great-grandfather had found the courage to choose care over duty, even temporarily, even at great cost. At 6 a.m., he walked through the waking city, past bodegas rolling up their security gates, past brownstones where families prepared for the day, past churches where early mass was beginning, past playgrounds where frost still clung to the swing sets. He ended up at Fort Greene Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the city as joggers passed and pigeons clustered around a woman scattering breadcrumbs. And finally, he let himself remember. Not in fragments, not in the managed doses he'd allowed for 10 years, but fully, completely, the night that had defined every choice since. Christmas Eve, 10 years ago, Tokyo. The Peninsula Hotel's conference room, 30 floors up, views of Tokyo Tower glittering with holiday lights he'd refused to look at directly. Junseo was 34, newly promoted to CEO after his father's unexpected death, determined to prove himself worthy of the succession. The logistics deal he was closing was worth $300 million. Not just money, but validation that he could lead, that he could be the son his father had wanted. Minjae called at 11 p.m. Junseo saw the name on his screen, saw the executives watching him across the conference table. Park from legal, Kim from finance, the Goldman Sachs team they were partnering with. Saw Lee Da-yoon, then a junior associate watching to see if the new CEO would flinch. He sent it to voicemail. The deal closed at 1 a.m. Champagne appeared. Congratulations echoed. Junseo felt nothing but relief that it was over, that he'd proven he could do this. He texted Min-jae at 1:17 a.m. Busy. Big day. Call you tomorrow. Merry Christmas. Min-jae didn't respond. At 3:17 a.m., his mother called. Yejin's voice was flat, mechanical, empty of everything but fact. Your brother is dead. Car accident on the Gyeongbu Expressway. Come home now. The flight back to Seoul was 7 hours. Junseo spent every minute reading and rereading the final text exchange. Busy. Big day. Call you tomorrow. Merry Christmas. 21 characters that meant, you're not worth my time. The deal matters more than you do. Whatever you need can wait. Except it couldn't. And now it would have to. Forever. At the funeral, people said Min-jae was troubled, reckless, always too emotional for business. They said the roads were icy, that it could have happened to anyone. They didn't say what Junseo knew, that Min-jae had been crying when he crashed, that his blood alcohol was 0, that there were no other cars involved. They didn't say it looked like he'd just stopped trying. No one mentioned the call. No one knew. Except Sang-wook, who had been in that Tokyo conference room, who had seen Junseo's face when he declined the call, who had said quietly, "You should answer that," and been ignored. For 10 years, Junseo had buried it, worked 18-hour days, expanded the company into 12 countries, grew revenue by 340%, erased Christmas from his calendar entirely. No parties, no decorations, no acknowledgement beyond signing the annual bonuses. Became the perfect son, the perfect CEO, perfectly controlled and perfectly miserable. He'd never asked Sang-wook what he thought. Never asked anyone. Just carried the weight alone, because asking meant acknowledging, and acknowledging meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking, and he couldn't afford to break. But sitting in Fort Greene Park, watching the sun rise over Brooklyn, surrounded by a city that didn't care about his empire or his guilt, Junseo felt the foundation crack. He pulled out his phone and called Sang-wook in Seoul, not caring that it was 8 p.m. there, not caring about protocols or hierarchies or appropriate boundaries. "Hyung, it's early. I need you to be honest with me," Junseo interrupted. That night in Tokyo, when I didn't answer Min-jae's call, did you think I was wrong? The silence stretched so long, Junseo thought the call had dropped. Then quietly, "Yes. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you're my friend. And I thought you were punishing yourself enough." Sang-wook's voice cracked. "And because I felt guilty too. I told you to answer. You didn't listen. I didn't push harder. Maybe if I had..." "It's not your fault," Junseo said. "It's not yours either. Not entirely." "Then whose is it?" "The system that taught us deals matter more than people. The culture that made Min-jae feel like he had to choose between family and integrity. The silence we all participated in." Sang-wook exhaled. "Junseo, what's happening there? In New York?" "I think I'm finally doing what Min-jae wanted me to do. I think I'm choosing people over profit. That'll cost you." "I know. The board will vote you out." "I know. Your mother will never forgive you." "I know." Junseo watched a group of kids arrive at the playground, their laughter bright against the morning cold. "But maybe I'll forgive myself, eventually." Sang-wook was quiet. Then, "He would be proud, Min-jae. He'd be proud you're finally figuring it out." Junseo's throat closed. He couldn't speak. Just nodded uselessly across 7,000 miles and an ocean of regret. "Do what you need to do, Hyung," Sang-wook said. "I'll handle the board." "Thank you." "That's what brothers do. And Junseo, call me. Really call me. Not just about business, about real things. Promise. I promise." He hung up and walked back to the archive as the sun painted Brooklyn gold, casting long shadows that for the first time in years didn't feel like ghosts chasing him, but companions walking beside. Selena was already at the archive, organizing boxes in the main hall. She looked up when Junseo entered, surprise flickering across her face. "You're here early." "I never left," he admitted. "I've been reading the letters all night." She set down the box she was holding, dust motes dancing in the morning light streaming through the windows. And I want to know why your family kept them. Why you preserved this so carefully when it would have been easier to let it disappear." Selena leaned against a shelf, her expression thoughtful, guarded but considering. "I didn't know my father growing up. My mother refused to talk about him, just said he was gone and we didn't need him. I believed her because children believe what they're told about their own stories." She picked up a framed photograph from a nearby table. A young black man in his 20s, smiling at the camera with gentle eyes. "When I turned 30, I was in Philadelphia, visiting a community archive just like this one. I was there for work, helping them set up a digital database, and I found his name, Marcus Robinson, in a folder marked Deportation Records, 1995 was." Her voice remained steady, but Junseo heard the old wound beneath it. "Turns out he'd been deported when I was 2. ICE raid at his construction site. My mother was so ashamed he was undocumented, ashamed she hadn't known, ashamed their daughter would grow up with that stigma, that she erased him. Told everyone he'd left us. Told me I was better off not knowing." Selena set down the photograph carefully. "For 28 years, I didn't know half of who I was. And then I found his letters, dozens of them, written to my mother from Haiti after his deportation. Love letters, apologies, promises he couldn't keep. He'd tried to come back legally, filed paperwork, sent money, wrote to me every birthday, every Christmas. My mother never gave me the letters, just kept them in a box like evidence of failure." She looked at Junseo directly, her dark eyes fierce. "When I read those letters, I realized that if that archive hadn't existed, I would have spent my whole life not knowing he wanted to stay. That he loved me, that I wasn't abandoned, I was stolen from." Junseo felt the parallel like a punch. "Is he still alive?" "Yes. Living in Port-au-Prince. I visited him 2 years after I found the letters. It was complicated. We're still navigating it. But I know him now. The real him. Not the version my mother created to protect herself." "That's why you do this," Junseo said quietly. "The archive. The preservation. Because everyone deserves to know their story. Not the sanitized version. Not the family-approved narrative. The real one, with all its flaws and failures and love." Selena crossed her arms. "My family erased my father because they saw complexity as weakness. Your family erased your great-grandfather's time in Brooklyn for the same reason. But erasure doesn't protect anyone. It just creates more ghosts." Junseo understood then, with crushing clarity, what Selena was offering him. Not salvation, not forgiveness, but truth. The chance to see clearly instead of comfortably. "My family erased my great-grandfather because he cared about people outside the bloodline," Junseo said slowly. "They saw it as weakness, distraction from duty, a failure to prioritize the family's advancement." "And you?" Selena asked. "What do you see it as now?" "The only thing that mattered." He looked at the walls covered with photographs, with stories, with proof that love transcends bloodlines and borders and balance sheets. The only thing that still matters. Something shifted between them. Not attraction yet, or maybe it had been there all along, hidden under defenses and distrust. Recognition. 2 people who'd spent their lives excavating what others tried to bury, finding each other in the ruins. "I want to help you save this place," Junseo said. "Not by buying it, not by managing it, by protecting it. However you need." Selena studied him. The silver ring turning on her finger in the unconscious gesture he was learning meant she was thinking, weighing, deciding. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I have nothing left to lose," he said, "and everything to repair." She didn't answer right away, just watched him, looking for cracks, for the tells that would reveal this was performance instead of transformation. Finally, "Come with me." She led him to the archive's basement, a temperature-controlled room where the oldest records were stored. Rows of filing cabinets, each labeled with family names, dates, countries of origin. The air smelled like preservation chemicals and old paper, like time itself arrested. "This is 100 years of Brooklyn," Selena said, her voice reverent. "Immigration records, birth certificates, death certificates, letters, photographs, oral histories we recorded before people passed. Most of these families have no idea this exists, but when they need it, when a kid is trying to apply for citizenship, or a grandmother wants to find her sister's grave, or someone just wants to know they mattered, it's here." She pulled open a drawer and showed him a file marked Kang. Inside, more letters, more photographs. Junseo's great-grandfather standing with a black family outside a brownstone, smiling. An unguarded smile Junseo had never seen in any official family photo. Another photo. Kang Hyun-woo holding a baby, his expression tender in a way that contradicted everything Junseo had been taught about men of his generation, his culture, his class. "He was happy here," Junseo murmured, touching the photograph lightly. "He was human here," Selena corrected. "Not a CEO, not a dynasty, not a symbol of success. Just a man who helped his neighbors and learned that community is a choice we make every day." Junseo closed the file carefully, precisely, the way he did everything, but his hands shook slightly, betraying the emotion he was working to contain. "If I walk away from the company to save this place, my mother will never forgive me. The board will destroy my reputation. I'll lose everything my family built over 3 generations. The Kang name will be associated with failure, with weakness, with a son who couldn't carry the burden." "Or," Selena said, her voice gentle but firm, "you'll gain everything they forgot mattered. You'll reclaim what your great-grandfather knew, and your family has spent 70 years trying to forget." He looked at her, this woman who'd spent her life making the invisible visible, who wore her mother's ring like armor and her father's absence like a scar she'd learned to read, who didn't need him but was willing to see him. "Will you help me figure out how?" Selena hesitated. Letting people in was dangerous. Trusting men who promised transformation was how you ended up erased from your own story, written into the margins of someone else's redemption arc. But looking at Junseo, exhausted, uncertain, standing at a crossroads she recognized from her own life, she felt something she'd spent years defending against. Hope. "But we do this the right way," she said firmly. "No corporate buyouts disguised as charity. No savior complexes. No Kang Holdings foundations with your name on the building. We build something that outlasts both of us, that belongs to the community, not to wealthy individuals feeling temporarily guilty." "Agreed. And if you change your mind, if the pressure gets too much, if your mother makes you feel guilty, if the board threatens you and you go back to Seoul, you walk away cleanly. No half measures. No trying to find a middle ground that destroys what we're building here while making you feel better about yourself. I won't change my mind. You don't know that yet. Neither do I." Selena held out her hand, not for a handshake but as a test. "But I'm willing to find out. Are you?" Junseo took her hand. Not an executive's handshake, but an equal's. Her palm was calloused from physical work, warm, sure. He held it a beat longer than professional, and she didn't pull away. "I'm willing," he said. And for the first time in 10 years, Junseo felt like he was building something instead of burying it, reaching toward something instead of running away. The next morning, Selena handed Junseo a broom at 8 a.m. sharp. "If you're serious about helping, start here." He stared at it. The broom was old, the bristles uneven, a far cry from the invisible cleaning crews that swept Kang Holdings' marble floors at night, so executives never had to see the labor that kept their world pristine. "You want me to sweep?" "I want you to see the work. Real work. Not strategy meetings and slide decks where people become numbers. Physical labor. The kind your great-grandfather did. The kind this place runs on. He wrapped his fingers around the wooden handle. It felt strangely heavy. Where should I start? Selena almost smiled. Main hall, then bathrooms if you're feeling ambitious. For 3 hours he swept. The archive's floors were old hardwood, beautiful but temperamental, collecting dust in every groove. He swept around mismatched chairs, under steel shelves, along baseboards where dust had settled like silt. His shoulders ached. His dress shirt stuck to his back. His palms developed the beginning of blisters. You missed a spot, Imani said, pointing to a corner near the door where a faint gray line remained. He swept it again. Better? Marginally. But the edge in her tone softened. The suit's an interesting choice for manual labor, by the way. I didn't pack work clothes. Rich people never do. She shrugged, not unkindly. You'll learn. After sweeping, Selena handed him a stack of acid-free folders. We're cataloging this donation. Family papers from the 1970s. Immigration records, letters, photos, follow the template. No improvising. The work was meticulous. Date, origin, condition, brief description. It reminded him of financial reports, except the assets here were fragile pieces of a life. A naturalization certificate, a union card, a faded Polaroid of a child holding a balloon on a Brooklyn sidewalk. The kind of ephemera no one in his world would call valuable, yet here it was, treated like treasure. An elderly Dominican man named Mr. Torres brought in a shoebox around noon, clutching it like something sacred. My abuela, he said. I found these in her closet after she passed. I don't know if they matter. They matter, Selena said immediately. We'll see how to preserve them. She nodded at Junseo. His test. He opened the box carefully. Inside, immigration papers from 1953. A social security card. Letters written in looping Spanish script. Photos of a young woman in a pressed dress in front of a building that made his breath catch. The same brick facade as the archive, just younger, its sign newly painted. This is this building, he said. Your grandmother worked here? She cleaned offices upstairs, Mr. Torres replied. Said the people here, on the first floor, were the only ones who looked her in the eye. We can catalog all of this, Junseo said. Your grandmother was part of this place. We can make sure no one forgets. Mr. Torres's eyes filled. Then she won't disappear. She never would, Selena said quietly. But this helps the world keep up. At lunch, they gathered around folding tables with mismatched chairs. Food covered every surface. Styrofoam containers from the Jamaican spot around the corner. Tupperware full of rice and beans. Aluminum pans of mac and cheese. Plastic tubs of collards and cornbread. In the middle of it all sat the plastic container of kimchi and rice cakes Junseo had brought, humble among the other dishes. Ms. Paulette, the Jamaican grandmother with the commanding laugh, speared a piece of kimchi with her fork. She chewed, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Spicy, she declared. Salty, funky. I like it. It's not homemade, he admitted. I bought it at a market. Then we'll fix that. She slapped the table, making everyone jump. You're Korean, yeah? Yes. Then you're learning to make kimchi, something proper, not this store stuff. Food is memory. She lifted her fork. Every culture knows that. You want to remember right? You cook. Across from them, a volunteer in a faded Brooklyn, is my home. T-shirt nodded. My grandmother used to say recipes are just edible archives. Selena glanced at Junseo, the corner of her mouth quirking up. Congratulations, you've been recruited. To what, exactly? He asked. Kim Jong, Ms. Paulette announced, butchering the pronunciation and not caring. The big batch thing. We'll adapt. Community Kimchi Day. You teach us what you know. We teach you what we know. Fair exchange. He thought of the women in his childhood. His grandmother. His aunts. The Ajumas in their neighborhood. gathering every autumn to make kimchi, huge basins in the courtyard, red pepper paste up to their elbows. He'd watched from upstairs, kept away because it was women's work, because he was being prepared for bigger things. "I don't know enough," he protested reflexively. "That's fine," Selena said. "You're not here because you know. You're here to learn." Afternoon brought more tasks. Selena had him sit at the front desk for an hour, greeting visitors. At first he defaulted to his executive posture. Polite, distant, efficient. But when a teenager came in asking if they had anything on black soldiers in the Korean War, he felt something shift. "We might," he said. "What's your connection?" "My great-grandfather," the teen replied. "He never talks about it. Said nobody cared then, so why would they care now?" "They care here," Selena called from a nearby table. They spent 30 minutes pulling files, finding a name that matched the teen's description in a list of black soldiers stationed near Busan in 1952. Watching the boy take a photo of the record, hands shaking, lips pressed together hard to keep from crying, did something permanent to Junseo's understanding of value. By the time they closed, his back hurt, his hands were raw, and a thin layer of dust covered his once impeccable shirt. He'd answered phones, labeled boxes, translated 3 lines of Korean on an old document, and been scolded twice by Imani for putting folders in the wrong color-coded bin. "You're surprisingly decent at following instructions," she admitted as she pulled on her bomber jacket. "High praise," he replied dryly. "Don't get used to it." When the last volunteer left, Selena turned off the main lights, leaving the soft glow of the hallway fixtures. The archive suddenly felt intimate, like a living thing exhaling after a long day. "You survived," she said. "That's one way to describe it. How was it, Mr. Kang? A day without meetings, without titles, without an assistant to buffer you from reality? Tiring, messy." He paused. "Necessary." She studied his face, the loosened collar, the hair that had fallen slightly out of place, the way his shoulders were less rigid than when he'd first walked in days ago. "Good. Come back tomorrow. We have a backlog from the 80s that would terrify your legal department. I'll be here." She stepped closer, close enough that he caught the faint scent of shea butter and paper dust on her skin. "You know this isn't a proving ground for you, right? You don't earn forgiveness by working yourself to the bone here." "I know." He held her gaze. "But maybe I earn participation. A seat in the circle I tried to erase. That's not mine to grant alone." She tilted her head. "But it's a start." They stood in the quiet hall, the air between them thick with possibilities neither of them was ready to name. Then Selena broke it, as she tended to do, with a clear, grounding reminder. "You run a company," she said. "With me, you ask. I thought I was learning to sweep. You're learning both." She locked the front door, the metal grate rattling down. "See you tomorrow, volunteer." "See you tomorrow, director." Outside, the Christmas lights across the street flickered on. For the first time in a decade, he didn't look away. While Junseo swept dust out of corners in Brooklyn, in Seoul, a very different kind of dust was being swept from old contracts. Lee Da-eun sat at the end of a polished conference table, tablet in hand, a team of lawyers around her. "Walk me through the Atlantic Avenue title again," she said in clipped Korean. One of the lawyers tapped his screen and mirrored a document onto the wall. The previous owner defaulted on property taxes in 2019. The city granted a 2-year deferral, contingent on timely payments moving forward. The nonprofit that owns it now, Urban Roots Living Archive, barely made the last payment. "And if they miss the next one?" Da-eun asked. "The building automatically becomes eligible for public auction," the lawyer replied. "No need for tenant consent. It goes to the highest bidder." "And when is that payment due?" "December 26th. The corner of Da-eun's mouth lifted. Efficient, elegant cruelty. "Can they pay it?" "They've been behind on rent for auxiliary spaces, applying for small grants, scraping. It's unlikely. Prepare everything the moment they default, she said. We position Kang Holdings as the white knight buyer at auction, saving a distressed asset, not evicting a beloved community center. The head of legal hesitated. Does Sejangnam know you're proceeding this way? He asked, using the honorific for CEO. Not yet, Da-un said. He's emotionally compromised at the moment. We'll present him with a fait accompli. He'll thank us when the numbers land on the right side of the ledger. She dismissed them with a nod, then sat alone for a moment, letting the mask slip. 15 years of loyalty. 15 years of 3 a.m. flights and hostile takeovers and doing the ugliest work so the Kangs could keep their hands clean. And now her CEO was in Brooklyn, sweeping floors for strangers. I'm not losing everything because you suddenly grew a conscience, she murmured. Then she picked up her tablet and set the demolition in motion. By the third day of volunteering, the ache in Junseo's shoulders felt almost good, tangible, earned. Executive of the Year is late, Imani called out as he walked in, glancing pointedly at the clock. It's 8:02. In archive time, that's late. You missed the morning coffee crisis. What crisis? We ran out. He blinked. Is it solved? Yes, she said. Because people who actually live here got up earlier than you. He took the hit with a small nod. Fair. Selena emerged from the back with a stack of folders. Today she wore a deep green dress with a denim jacket, silver ring catching the light every time she gestured. We're reorganizing the 90s files, she said. Immigration, housing, and one terrifying drawer of police reports families asked us to keep copies of. Content warning, systemic violence. Understood. As they worked, he saw the way she moved through the space. Precise, economical, always aware of who needed what. A hand on Ms. Paulette's elbow as she navigated the stairs. A quiet check-in with a teenager reading their grandfather's arrest record for the first time. A stern but kind reminder to a volunteer to use gloves with certain documents. He also saw how much she carried alone. Every question, every crisis, every grant deadline seemed to land on her desk. Imani was sharp and competent, but Selena was the center of gravity, the person everyone looked to. Around noon, as they sat at a table labeling files, he said, "You could have a bigger team, more staff. You should." With what money? Selena asked, arching an eyebrow. You could fundraise more aggressively. Corporate partnerships, naming rights. There are companies in this city that would pay a lot to be associated with this kind of work. Selena set her pen down. Be careful. Of what? Of thinking everything can be scaled without changing its nature. She leaned back, studying him. You know what happens when you bring in big corporate money? They want metrics, deliverables. They want to say, look at the stories we saved. But they don't want to talk about the ones they erased to build what they have. I'm not talking about slapping a logo on your front door, he said. I'm talking about sustainability. And I'm talking about power. Her voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it. Power is always in the contract. The person who doesn't need the money writes the terms. The person who does signs and hopes they can live with them. He thought of 1,000 acquisition agreements, 1,000 desperate sellers who'd shaken his hand like salvation, and then watched their companies gutted. You think I don't know that? I think you know it too well. Selena picked up her pen again. Which is why I need you to understand something clearly. You run a company. With me, you ask. I did ask. No. Her gaze locked on his. You suggested, you framed, you steered. That's how men like you are trained to move through the world. I'm asking you to stop. To sit in a room where your last name doesn't give you default authority and learn how to listen without planning your response. The words should have felt like an indictment. Instead, they felt like a diagnosis he'd been waiting years to hear. Then I'm asking now, he said quietly. How do you need help that doesn't compromise what this place is? Her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for him to see that this was the question she'd been waiting for. Not, what can I do? But, How do you define help? Come to the board meeting, she said. Tomorrow night. Community board, not corporate. They're deciding how to handle the building. You don't speak unless they ask you to. You answer honestly, even if it makes you look bad. You accept their anger. No defensiveness, no explaining yourself into a hero. That's the job interview? That's the bare minimum. She capped her pen. Can you handle being the least important voice in the room? He thought of boardrooms where everyone angled their chairs toward him, of flights rerouted because he wanted to leave an hour early, of assistants who rearranged their lives so his remained frictionless. Yes, he said. I can handle it. Then we'll see. And for the first time since he'd become CEO, he went into a meeting with no agenda but to listen. The board meeting the next night was crowded. Folding chairs, standing room, kids sitting on the floor with coloring books while their parents argued about tax law and survival. Selena introduced him with a single sentence. This is Kyungrae Soh, she said. He's the man whose company is trying to buy our building. He's also been volunteering here this week. Neither fact cancels the other out. Murmurs, some hostile, some merely curious. He felt each one like a physical thing. A woman in her 50s raised her hand. Did you know, when you started all this, that your people were using that tax default clause? That they were waiting for us to slip so they could swoop in? No, he said. I didn't know about the clause. I should have. It's my responsibility. I own that. But you benefited from not knowing, someone else said. That's convenient. He swallowed. Yes, it is. Are you here because you care? Another voice asked. Or because you got caught? Both, he answered, because anything else would be a lie. They questioned him for an hour. About Kang Holdings. About chaebol politics. About his mother. About why someone like him suddenly cared about a building in Brooklyn when there were 1,000 other places he'd never set foot in. He answered as best he could, and when he didn't know the answer, he said so. At one point, someone asked, if your board forced you to choose this place or your position, what would you pick? The room went quiet. Selena's gaze found his. I don't know, he said honestly. But I'm starting to believe that if I keep choosing the company over places like this, then I've already lost something far more important. When the meeting finally ended, the board thanked him, with varying degrees of sincerity, and asked him to leave so they could vote. Selena walked him to the door. How bad was it? He asked. You did what I asked. You listened. She searched his face. You didn't try to charm them. Could I have? No. She smiled, tired but genuine. Not this room. That's why I trust them. That night turned into the Christmas Eve you already saw. The community dinner, his public confession of the missed call, his breakdown in the library, Selena sitting beside him without offering cheap absolution, the almost kiss she pulled back from because she refused to be anyone's consolation prize. By the time he stepped out into the pale blue of Christmas morning and called his mother to say he was canceling the purchase, the decision had already been made inside him. He was done being a ghost in his own life. Her threat, if you do that, I'll remove you from the company, landed differently now. Less like a disaster, more like the inevitable cost of finally telling the truth. He hung up, slipped his dead watch off his wrist. He'd noticed during his breakdown in the library that the battery had stopped sometime in the night, and put it in his pocket. Time, for once, wasn't something he wanted to measure. He walked back inside to help clean up, sleeves rolled, shoulders loose, a man who had finally let himself fall apart and was still standing. The photograph that hit the Korean and U.S. tabloids 3 days later was from that morning, taken on someone's phone, sold for more money than the photographer made in a month. In it, Selena stood on the archive steps, hair pulled back, laughing at something off camera. Jun Seo was beside her, head turned toward her, an expression on his face no one in Seoul had ever seen, unguarded, almost soft. The headlines did the rest. Kang Hair abandons deal for forbidden love in Brooklyn. Chaebol Prince falls for American activist, puts legacy at risk. Christmas scandal. CEO seen living a double life in New York. Selena first saw it when Marcus, the journalist, hesitated in the doorway with his phone. "You need to see this," he said. She read the headline once, then again. Her jaw clenched. "Are they wrong?" Marcus asked quietly. "About me?" "Yes," she said. "About him? I don't know yet." Within hours, reporters were outside the archive doors, cameras ready. Some wanted a soundbite about the romance. Others wanted a quote they could twist into a story of seduction and betrayal. None of them were there for the archive itself. Imani slammed the front gate shut. "We're not doing this," she said. "We're not letting them make this about a love story when it's about survival." Inside, the community buzzed. Some teased, some whispered, some worried aloud that Selena was getting involved with the enemy. Pastor Jerome, thinner now, sat in a chair in the corner, oxygen tube in his nose. Selena knelt beside him. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm dying," he replied dryly. "Quiet comes with the territory." She huffed a laugh. "They think I'm sleeping with the man trying to destroy us." He studied her, old eyes sharp. "Are you falling for him?" "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point." His hand found hers, surprisingly strong. "Real love doesn't make you smaller, child. But you have to know if he's growing or just hiding in you." "I don't want to be anybody's hiding place," Selena whispered. "Then don't." Pastor Jerome squeezed her fingers. "Make sure he walks into the fire with you, not behind you. And not just for you. For what you believe in. For this place. Otherwise, let him go." His words settled in her chest like a compass. When the clause in the auction came to light, thanks to Sang-wook's panicked call, to Da-eun's paperwork, to Marcus digging, Selena's world narrowed to a single nauseating point. December 26th. "He can fix this," Imani said. "He owns the company. He can shut this down." "Then let him try," Selena answered. "But we don't stop organizing while he does." They split tasks. Imani and Marcus worked with lawyers and students at a local law clinic to explore injunctions. The community board started a crowdfunding campaign. Selena did what she did best, told the story with precision and dignity so that people understood what was really at stake. In the middle of it, Kyungrae Soh called. "We need to talk," he said. In person. They met at a small cafe away from Atlantic Avenue. No reporters, just a barista who didn't care who he was. He laid out the facts, the tax clause, the auction, the way Da-eun had moved without his knowledge. "I didn't authorize it," he said, "but it's my company, my responsibility. I'm stopping it. I'll wire the tax payment myself today." "How long does that protect us?" Selena asked. "Legally, a cycle, maybe 2. You'll be safe for a year if I keep the board at bay. And then? And then I'll have dismantled the rest of the acquisition strategy. You're asking us to trust you on a maybe." "I'm asking you to give me time," he said, desperation bleeding through his usually controlled tone. "I can fix this from the inside." "No." Selena's voice was low and sure. "You can't." His eyes flashed. "You don't believe I have that power?" "I believe the system you're part of is designed to absorb guilt and keep moving," she said. "You pay the taxes, the acquisition gets delayed, your PR team spins a story about corporate responsibility, and a year from now when the media has moved on, they try again. Not if I'm there to stop it." "That's the savior myth talking," Selena replied. "You're not the exception to the rule just because you feel bad, Kyungrae Soh. You're still the man at the top of a structure that eats places like this." "So what do you want me to do?" he asked, voice rough. "Walk away and let Da-eun tear it all down? I want you to make a choice that isn't about optics or strategy." She leaned forward. "You told me you wanted to live like the truth matters. The truth is, this company is built on the same erasures your great-grandfather tried to resist. The same silences that killed your brother. You don't fix that by paying one bill. You fix it by refusing to be the kind of man that structure needs at the top. He stared at her, throat working. You're asking me to give up everything. I'm asking you not to ask me to become a dependent in your story, she said. I'm asking you not to make me collateral damage in your inability to decide who you are. The words landed like a slap and a benediction at once. I will pay the tax, he said after a long moment. Not as a condition, as a stopgap. You shouldn't lose this place because of a clause you never knew existed. Thank you, she said. But that doesn't buy you my trust. I know. He stood, his chair scraping softly. I'll cancel the other acquisitions. Not just this one. All 3 buildings. You already should have. I know that too. He left without reaching for her, without asking for more than she'd given. Outside, the winter light turned everything a flat, unforgiving white. He felt stripped bare, and for once, he didn't reach for armor. When Marcus's exposé dropped, 3 buildings, 3 communities, 1 corporate lie. The city paid attention. He didn't just list the properties. He interviewed elders in Harlem about a jazz club that had kept music alive through blackouts and crack epidemics. He talked to a Bronx youth group that used their building's basement for restorative justice circles instead of calling the police. He painted a clear picture. These weren't distressed assets. They were living ecosystems, targeted precisely because they didn't have the money to fight back. He quoted Selena. We're not anti-development. We're anti-erasure. There's a difference. He quoted Imani. I grew up sleeping in the reading room of this archive because it was safer than the streets. If you think this is just about bricks, you're not listening. He even quoted Kyungrae Soh from a brief call. The decisions made under my leadership harmed communities I barely understood. That was ignorance, not neutrality. I'm responsible for what happens next. The backlash hit Kang Holdings fast. Protests outside their New York offices. Think pieces in Korean and English about chaebol philanthropy, about the way Korean conglomerates gave less in meaningful ways than global peers, especially when scandal made them defensive. Hashtags calling out memory laundering, where corporations funded museums while quietly destroying grassroots archives. Inside the archive, the effect was immediate. Donations poured into the crowdfunding campaign. Volunteers doubled. A local union pledged to help with legal support. A small foundation sent an email. We've been looking for a community-led memory project to back. Can we meet? Selena watched the thermometer graphic in the front hall rise, line by hard-earned line. $10,000, $25,000, $38,000. We might actually do this, Imani whispered, without them. That was always the goal, Selena said. Still, the wound of realization that Kyungrae Soh had known about the other buildings and not told her immediately cut deep. When she confronted him and he said, they were old plans. It didn't matter that he'd started to cancel them. The timing was wrong. The silence was too familiar. Then I'm an exception, she'd said. Not a change. She hadn't returned his calls after that. The boardroom in Seoul was airless, despite the view of the Han River and the expensive ventilation. Power could suffocate as effectively as any sealed room. The New York situation has escalated beyond acceptable risk, one board member said, adjusting his cufflinks. Our share price dipped 3% in 2 days. It'll recover, another countered. But investors are spooked. They're asking if emotion is making our CEO unreliable. Heejin sat at the head of the table, spine straight, expression carved in frost. We can't afford that question, she said. Not now. Da-eun presented a slideshow. Neutral colors, numbers, headlines, photos of protests, screenshots of articles, graphs showing volatility. Under his leadership, she said, we've expanded into new markets, yes, but we've also increased our reputational risk. The Atlantic Avenue property could still be acquired via auction, but his personal interference has made us a target. You're suggesting? A director prompted. A vote of no confidence, Da-eun said. We appoint an interim CEO. someone the market trusts. We continue our growth strategy with more discipline. All eyes slid to Sang-wook. He cleared his throat. And who would that interim CEO be? Your name has come up, a director said. You're well liked, seen as steady. Sang-wook glanced at Hee-jin. She gave nothing away. It would be inappropriate for me to comment, he said. I'm here to discuss numbers, not successors. When they asked Jun-seo to join, he walked in without a tie, hair slightly mussed, jet-lagged from his flight. For the first time since he'd taken the position, he looked like a man, not a role. We can delay the formal vote, a director said, if you commit to salvaging the Atlantic Avenue acquisition. I won't, he said calmly. The acquisition is over. You're letting one woman and a small group of activists dictate terms to a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, someone scoffed. I'm choosing not to destroy a community archive that my own great-grandfather helped build, he replied. If we can't grow without erasing the past, then our strategy is flawed. This is naive, Da-eun said. You're letting guilt, and perhaps personal attachment, cloud judgment. Maybe, he said. But there comes a point where calling everything strategy is just a way to avoid saying we chose harm. The board moved to a vote. The outcome was clear before the hands rose. Do you have anything to say before we proceed? One director asked. Yes, he said. I resign. Shock rippled around the table. You can't just... Someone started. I can, he said. And I have. The papers are filed. I'm transferring my voting shares into a trust that will be managed by Sang-wook and an independent oversight board. The company will survive. It always does. But I'm done asking it to be my life. He turned to his mother. Eo Myeonim, I know this isn't the son you wanted. All I can say is, I'm finally trying to be the brother Min-jae needed me to be. I hope one day you'll understand. Hye-jin's lips parted, then pressed together again. She said nothing. He bowed, a deep, formal bow, one he'd never given as CEO, and walked out. In the hallway, Sang-wook caught up with him. You just blew up your life, he said. No. For the first time in years, the air felt breathable. I just stopped pretending this was living. What will you do? Go back to Brooklyn. And then? Ask her if she'll let me try again. That night, Kang Hee-jin sat alone in her penthouse, staring at the city lights. The walls were lined with paintings, the shelves with awards and photographs. Her late husband shaking hands with presidents, her sons in suits at various company events. The photo from their last family vacation, both boys in shorts by the ocean, grinning, was tucked into a corner of a shelf, almost hidden. Her phone lay on the table. She picked it up. Put it down. Picked it up again. Finally, she dialed. When her son answered, his voice was quieter than she remembered. Eo Myeonim. You resigned, she said. Just like that. Not just like that, he replied. It took me 10 years. Do you hate us that much? Your father's work? My work? No, he said. I just hate what I became inside it. Silence stretched. She could hear distant city noise through his end of the line. Sirens, laughter, a car horn. He called me too, she blurted. That night, your brother. His breath caught. What? At 10:45 p.m., I was at a charity gala, talking about scholarships and opportunity and how Kang Holdings cared about the future. Her voice shook. I saw his name. I thought, he's always so dramatic. I'll call him tomorrow. She had never said this aloud, not to anyone, not even to herself in words she could hear. I've blamed you, she said, each syllable an admission and an apology, because it was easier than looking at my own phone record, easier than remembering I pressed decline too. A sound tore out of him, half laugh, half sob. All this time I thought, you thought you were the only one who failed him, she finished. You weren't. He called both of us, he whispered. And we both chose something else. Legacy, she said bitterly. Image, control. All the things I thought would protect you. Protect us. They sat with that for a long moment, two people finally turning to face the same wound. I don't know how to be anything else, she admitted. I don't know who I am if I'm not Kang Hae-jin of Kang Holdings. I don't know who I am without it either, he said. But I'm going to find out. In Brooklyn. With that woman. With myself, he corrected gently. And yes, with her. If she still wants me. She exhaled. I don't understand you. You don't have to, he said softly. But I hope one day you'll visit. See what we're building. The word we snagged at her. Not a company. A community. Your great-grandfather wrote letters, she said suddenly. To someone in America. I found one once in your grandfather's desk. He burned it. I know, Kyungrae Soh said. I've read the ones that survived. He looked happy in the photo that was with it. She swallowed. Happier than I ever saw him. Come see the other photos, he said. You might find out who he really was. Her pride warred with her curiosity. Pride had won for 70 years. For the first time, it faltered. I'll think about it, she said. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a door, cracked open. That's more than I expected, he said. Good night, Aomionim. Good night, my son, she replied. And this time when she said it, it wasn't a command. It was a blessing. December 31st. The archive thrummed like a heart. Volunteers printed flyers about the vote. Reporters hovered across the street, held back by a firm line of community members. Inside the board meeting, the tension was tangible. Folded arms, furrowed brows, hope and suspicion in equal measure. We've raised $39,000, Selena announced. We need more to secure the building outright and cover legal fees, but that's $39,000 they didn't expect us to have. A cheer went up, small, fierce. The door opened. Kyungrae Soh stepped in, not in a suit, but in dark jeans and a navy sweater, hands empty. No entourage, no briefcase. He looked like he'd been awake for days, and, somehow, more awake than ever. I'm not here as CEO of anything, he said. I'm not that anymore. Murmurs. I'm here as the great-grandson of a Korean man who wouldn't have survived this country without a black family in Brooklyn. I'm here as someone who has been on the wrong side of too many contracts and is trying very hard to live differently. Selena studied him from the front. Something in his posture, slightly hunched, receptive, told her he wasn't here to sell anything. He stepped forward, holding a folder. I've liquidated my personal assets, art, apartments, a car collection I never really cared about. The total is just under $18 million. A rustle moved through the room. It's not Kang Holdings' money, it's mine, and I'm donating it to a foundation that will be managed by this community board and partner communities. Not by me. A board member frowned. What's the catch? I have no voting rights, he said. No veto, no seat on the board. My name doesn't go on any plaques. I will receive quarterly reports like any other donor, but I don't influence decisions. The charter makes that impossible by design. Imani flipped through the documents he'd placed on the table. Her eyes widened as she scanned the clauses. He's not lying, she said quietly. This thing is airtight. He gave up control on purpose. The first allocation, he continued, is enough to buy this building outright at a fair market price, pay off every cent owed, and establish an operational reserve. The rest will seed sister archives in Harlem, the Bronx, and any other community that wants to build their own urban roots. Why? Someone called out. Not hostile, just bewildered. Because my family's wealth was built, in part, on forgetting where we came from, he said. My great-grandfather was held by your people when he was alone in a foreign country. You fed him, gave him work, trusted him with your children. He went home and let that part of his story be erased. He swallowed. I spent 10 years running from the night my brother died. Running into work, into deals, into being the son my mother wanted, instead of the man my brother needed me to be. I can't change any of that." He glanced at Selena, then back at the room. "But I can choose, from this day forward, to live like memory matters more than profit. To treat this not as charity, but as a very late, very necessary repayment of a debt my family incurred and never acknowledged." Silence, the kind that had weight. "You run a company," someone in the back said. "You sure you can handle being just a volunteer?" "I don't run a company anymore," he said simply. "And yes, that's exactly what I want. To show up, to file, to listen, to make coffee badly and sweep floors and learn how to be useful without being in charge." The board asked questions, detailed, skeptical, wise, about governance, about what would happen if he tried to pressure them later, about what would happen if he died. "It becomes a permanent endowment," he said. "No reversion clauses, no back doors." Finally, they asked him to step outside. He found himself again in the hallway of photographs where he'd first argued with Selena. This time, he took his time with each frame. Faces he now knew by name. Stories he could recite. Proof he'd been changed, not just moved. After what felt like a small eternity, the door opened. Selena stood there, board behind her. "We voted," she said. "And?" "We're accepting the foundation," she said, "under the terms you proposed. No control, no naming rights, full autonomy." His knees weakened with relief he hadn't allowed himself to anticipate. "As for you," she stepped closer, eyes searching his. "You get what you asked for." "A chance?" he asked. "A job," she corrected. "Volunteer, no salary. Worst schedule, least glamorous tasks." His answering smile was small and stunned. "I accept." She lowered her voice. "This doesn't erase what came before." "I don't want it to," he said. "I want to live with it, better." She nodded once. Then in front of everyone, she reached for his hand. He laced his fingers through hers, and the room erupted in applause, not for a couple, but for a decision. Not for romance, but for a shared future. Outside, fireworks began testing the sky early. Inside, two families, Robinson and Kang, Brooklyn and Seoul, past and present, relit something older than any company. January tasted different when you no longer had a mountain of quarterly reports waiting. Junseo's days filled with things that would never make a shareholder smile. Digitizing brittle pages, helping elders navigate email, setting up scanners, fixing jammed printers, making supply lists and discovering, to his horror, that toner was more expensive than some luxury wines he'd bought without blinking. "You're frowning at the receipts," Selena said one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe of the tiny admin office. "How does paper cost this much?" he demanded softly. "And why do these chairs squeak like this? And why is your landlord—" "Our landlord," she corrected. He looked up. "You're invested now," she said. "If you're going to mutter about the heating system, you can say, our." The word landed warm in his chest. Our. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "We could create a central digital infrastructure for all the archives. Secure cloud storage, redundant backups, training programs for local volunteers." "You want to build us a digital backbone," she said, amused. "Yes, and then hand it over. No control. Just skills I finally get to use without hurting anyone. Write it up as a proposal," she said. "Then bring it to the National Coalition next month. You'll be the least impressive person in the room. It'll be good for you." He grinned. "You like me humbled. I like you human." Their relationship grew in the quiet spaces between crises. Mornings making coffee in her kitchen. Now their kitchen, after he moved in. His few carefully chosen belongings blending into her shelves of books and plants. Late nights on the archive's rooftop, watching the city, talking about fathers and brothers and the strange, specific loneliness of being the person other people leaned on without realizing you were leaning too. They argued too. About pace. He wanted to move fast, scale, replicate. She insisted on depth over speed. About communication. He sometimes defaulted to silence when overwhelmed. She needed words, even messy ones. About his mother's tentative attempts to reconnect. Selena refused to be a bridge if Hyejin saw her only as the woman who stole her son. "We're not a merger," Selena said one night after a tense phone call with Seoul. "We're not two entities integrating for efficiency. We are two lives, two histories, choosing to intersect. That's messier. And more important." He wrote the sentence down later, in a notebook Pastor Jerome had left to Selena and she'd given him. He was learning to journal, at her insistence. "Executive, meet introspection," she'd joked. He was starting to like the man who spoke from those pages. The foundation funds made the building safe. The crowdfunding money built something else. Pride. Imani spearheaded the national network. "If we just hand communities a check, we risk reproducing the same power dynamics," she said during a planning meeting. "We need a model where local groups raise a base amount themselves, then the foundation matches and supports. That way they come in as owners, not beneficiaries." "Co-curation," Selena said. "Co-ownership, not franchising." They traveled. To Harlem, to the Bronx, to Detroit, Atlanta, Oakland, meeting with existing community centers, listening before offering anything. Sometimes the answer was, "We don't need an archive, we need childcare." The foundation funded that. Memory also meant remembering what people actually asked for. In Harlem, a group of elders told them, "We've been keeping our own archives in our closets for 50 years. What we need is someone to teach us how to preserve them before the mold wins." In the Bronx, a youth organizer said, "We don't want y'all's model. We want our own. But we'd love to learn from your mistakes." "We have plenty," Selena assured them. Watching her in those meetings, Junseo fell in love with her over and over, the way she refused to impose, the way she insisted on crediting the communities for their own resilience. At one conference on archives and social justice, a panelist asked her on stage, "How has partnering with a former Chibol CEO changed your work?" "It hasn't changed the work," she said. "It's changed the conditions under which we do it." She paused. "Let's be clear. A man with money showing up doesn't magically fix structural inequality. But when he's willing to divest from control and invest in repair, that can create space for people who've been carrying the load alone." Later in the hotel, she teased him. "You know they were dying to say Christmas miracle. I'm glad you didn't let them. Please, you think I'm going to let them package us like a holiday special? Mature love doesn't fit in a gift box." He kissed her shoulder, smiling into her skin. "I like how you say us." "Get used to it," she murmured. By the time Pastor Jerome's health declined sharply, the center was on solid footing, but Selena was fraying. She split her days between the archive, the growing national network, and the hospice room where the man who'd been her mentor, father figure, and co-conspirator lay fading. One afternoon, she came home late, shoulders tight, eyes dull with held-back tears. The apartment smelled like stew, something warm and familiar. "I cooked," Junseo said awkwardly from the kitchen. "I tried. Ms. Paulette supervised on FaceTime." "You cooked," she repeated, staring at the bubbling pot. "It might be inedible." She walked over, lifted the lid, inhaled. Something loosened in her chest. "It smells like my childhood. Then I did something right." She sat at the table and finally let the tears fall. He didn't rush to her, didn't pepper her with questions. He set a bowl in front of her, sat opposite, and waited. "Every time I leave his room, I feel like I'm abandoning him," she said. "Every time I stay, I feel like I'm abandoning this place. You're not abandoning anyone. Tell that to my body." She rubbed her temples. "I'm tired of being the strong one, the responsible one. You're allowed to be held too," he said softly. "By you?" she asked, raw. "By me," he answered. "If you want." She did. She went around the table and curled up next to him on the bench, letting her head fall against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, and they sat like that until the stew went lukewarm. "Marry me," he said quietly, the words out before he'd planned them. She stiffened. He exhaled. "Wrong timing." "I know. Consider it a data point. I'm there. Whenever you are." She didn't answer then. She wasn't ready. But the words stayed with her, settled somewhere behind her ribs. Weeks later, after Pastor Jerome's funeral, after the 3-block procession and the community dinner and the hours of stories about his stubbornness and tenderness, she turned to Junseo in the basement archive. "Move in with me," she said, heart pounding. "Officially." He blinked. "That's not the sentence I expected." "I'm not ready for a wedding," she said. "I am ready for you taking up actual closet space in my life. That's my version of radical commitment right now." He laughed, eyes wet. "Then I accept." Cohabitation was its own education. He learned about her nightly tea ritual, her habit of talking to plants as she watered them, the way she sometimes needed silence more than comfort. She learned about his insomnia, his tendency to clean when anxious, the way he ran his fingers over the scar on his hand when he was thinking about his brother. They fought about small things, dishes, laundry, whether it was acceptable to file documents on the kitchen table, her, no, and big ones. One night, after a tense call with his mother, where Hyejin made a barbed comment about Western women and their independence, Selena said, "I will not be your bridge if she refuses to see me as a human being." "I'm not asking you to," he said. I want you both in my life." "Then you're going to have to be bilingual," she replied. "In more than language, in culture, in expectations. I am not moving to Seoul to become some quiet shadow at company events." "There is no company," he reminded her. "There is always a company when there is a family like yours." He thought about it. "Then if she wants to see me, she comes here, to this world. And if she doesn't, then she doesn't see me much." His voice shook, but he didn't look away. "I love her. I won't make you pay for her limitations." It was one of the reasons later that she said yes so easily when he tried again. 6 months after the foundation launch, the archive's main hall looked different in subtle ways. The roof no longer leaked during sudden summer storms. The heating system hummed quietly instead of coughing. The shelves were sturdier, the filing cabinets new and smooth running. But the soul of the place, the mismatched chairs with duct tape repairs, the hand-painted signs in a dozen languages, the way children felt free to run between legs and climb onto laps, remained untouched. On a humid June evening, fairy lights strung across the ceiling cast a warm glow over food tables groaning under the weight of potluck contributions. Jerk chicken glistening with marinade, trays of empanadas still steaming, bowls of kimchi that Junseo had helped Ms. Paulette perfect. Collard greens slow-simmered with smoked turkey, rice and peas dotted with red peppers. The air smelled like every holiday he'd ever known, blended into one defiant celebration of survival. Selena and Junseo stood at the front of the room, her in a flowing emerald dress that caught the light on her silver ring, him in a simple white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, the scar on his hand visible for anyone who knew to look. Imani, now leading the Harlem branch while finishing her master's thesis on community archives, held a small stack of note cards. Her curly hair was pulled into a high bun, hoop earrings catching the light. "We're here tonight," she began, voice carrying easily over the chatter, "to celebrate 3 things: Pastor Jerome's legacy, the survival and growth of the Urban Roots Network now spanning 5 cities, and the fact that our director has terrible taste in music at staff meetings." Laughter rolled through the crowd like a wave. "And one more thing," she added, eyes gleaming with mischief. "But that's for later. First, let's hear from the people who make this place real." Speakers took the mic in turn, elders with stories of visas secured through rediscovered documents, Teenagers who'd found grandparents' immigration papers and suddenly understood family silences. Partner organizations from Oakland and Atlanta, sharing how the foundation model let them preserve local histories without losing control. Mr. Park, the Korean War veteran, spoke last. Kang Hyun-woo came here broken from war, he said in careful English, then switched to Korean that Jun Seo translated quietly for those around him. This community mended him. Not with money, with hands, with food, with trust. Now his great-grandson returns the favor, not with money either, with the same. The room stilled, then applauded, not thunderous, but deep, resonant. Then Imani caught Selena's eye and gave a subtle nod. Now. Selena turned to Jun Seo, her heart beating steadily, not with fear, but with the clarity that came from months of shared mornings, shared fights, shared silences. She took the microphone, her voice filling the space without amplification. "You all know I don't do spectacle," she began, a smile tugging at her lips. "I do spreadsheets and grant proposals and occasionally yelling at people, lovingly, for mislabeling boxes." Chuckles rippled through. "But there's something I want to say where you can all hear it. Because none of this building we own outright now, this network reaching Detroit and Oakland, this future where memory belongs to communities, not corporations, happened because of one person. It happened because of unlikely choices. Some of them mine. Some of them his." She reached for Jun Seo's hand, lacing their fingers together deliberately, her mother's silver ring brushing his skin. Cameras flashed from the back. Imani had invited a journalist friend, but only one, and only because Marcus Torres had earned the right to tell this story right. "When you walked in here the first time," she said to him, but loud enough for everyone, "you were the man who came to buy us, the man whose company was set to erase us with a tax clause we never saw coming. And I told you, loudly, that I didn't want to be saved. I didn't want a billionaire's guilt money or a corporate foundation with strings." "You yelled it," Ms. Paulette called from the second row. "Details," Selena shot back, grinning. The room laughed with her. "The point is, you could have written a check, called it a lesson learned, taken a few photos for your redemption arc, and gone back to your glass tower in Seoul. You could have stayed the man who erases ghosts." Jun Seo swallowed, his thumb brushing her knuckles unconsciously. "But you didn't." Her voice softened, but carried. "You stayed. You swept floors until your hands blistered. You listened when the board tore into you, and they should have, and you knew it. You gave up not just money, but power, control, the family legacy that defined you. And you never once asked to put your name on this place, or take credit, or lead." He blinked rapidly, eyes glistening under the fairy lights. "I told you I wouldn't be anyone's redemption prize," she continued. "And I'm not. I'm your partner. I chose this. I chose you. Knowing every acquisition you greenlit before you walked through that door. Knowing the brother you lost and the guilt you carried. Knowing your mother still calls from Seoul asking when you'll come to your senses. Hye-jin, sitting in the third row with rigid posture, pearl necklace gleaming, lips pressed thin. Selena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Gasps swept the room like wind. Jun Seo's breath caught. "Selena? Relax," she said, a teasing glint in her eye. "I'm not doing the gender politics thing in front of this many witnesses. Think of this less as a proposal, and more as a formal acknowledgement of what we've already built." She opened the box. Inside lay a simple silver band. Not flashy, not new. It was his great-grandfather's ring, the one from the 1952 letters, resized and polished, but retaining its patina of time. Tiny Korean characters engraved inside. Gyeogara. Remember. "I had this appraised," she said, voice catching slightly. "Not for value, but for history. And I realized something while holding it. Your great-grandfather's story didn't end when he left this building in 1954. It was paused. Someone, your family, his family, tried to close the book early, write him out of the official narrative. We're here tonight to finish that story properly. She took his left hand gently, her dark eyes locked on his. You belong here, she said, sliding the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Not because of what you gave away, not because of the foundation or the network or the $18 million, because of who you are choosing to be every single day. The man who shows up at 7:45 a.m. complaining about toner prices but stays until 10 p.m., helping a family trace their roots to 1923. He stared at the ring, then at her, throat working. So if you still want to marry me, and I know you do. Laughter surged around them, warm and knowing. Then consider this my answer in advance. Yes, obviously yes. We'll do the paperwork later. Right now, I just wanted witnesses. Because this isn't just about us. It's about all of you. The room exploded. Cheers. Ululations from the Caribbean elders. Applause that shook the rafters. Ms. Paulette started a call-and-response chant. Love don't buy it. Love build it. Mr. Ainda. Park shouted blessings in Korean, tears streaming down his lined face. Imani, filming discreetly on her phone, wiped her eyes and mouthed, finally. Even Hyejin, in the third row, had a hand pressed to her mouth, eyes suspiciously bright. Junseo pulled Selena into his arms, kissing her fiercely amid the chaos, tasting salt from her tears and sweetness from the joy they'd built together. Chatur. 2 years later, Christmas Eve. Snow fell softly outside the Urban Roots Living Archive, blanketing Atlantic Avenue in quiet white. Inside, the main hall glowed with the same Christmas lights that had once made Junseo flinch, the ones that now symbolized chosen family, hard-won peace, and rituals reclaimed. The network had grown to 23 locations across 12 cities, each community-led, each preserving stories that corporations and time had tried to erase. The Kang Hyunwoo Memorial Fund, autonomously governed, with Junseo receiving the same quarterly reports as any other donor, supported them all. Selena stood at the front in a crimson sweater, silver rings, hers and his, catching the light as she welcomed the circle. Junseo sat beside her on a folding chair, no longer self-conscious, his posture relaxed among the elders, children, immigrants, activists who had become extended family. Tell a memory no one has ever asked you about, Selena invited. The same words from 3 years ago, when a lonely billionaire first darkened their door. Stories flowed. A Haitian elder about finding his father's merchant marine records, proof of a life beyond poverty. A Latina teenager about her abuela's labor strike photos from 1970, hidden in a Bible. A Korean adoptee about discovering her birth mother's love letters, preserved against all odds. When it circled to Junseo, he stood, pulling Selena up with him. Their wedding bands, simple, matching, engraved with intertwined roots, gleamed. 3 years ago tonight, he began, voice steady. I was in a corporate car outside this building, staring at a letter that upended everything I thought I knew. I hated Christmas. I hated the lights. I hated the date that marked the worst choice of my life. Quiet settled, respectful. I came here to buy silence. He continued. To turn stories into square footage. Instead, this community gave me something I didn't know I was starving for. Truth. About my great-grandfather. About my brother. About myself. He turned to Selena. And you. You handed me that letter and refused to let me run. You saw the man behind the title and demanded he show up fully. Or not at all. Ms. Paulette called out. She don't play. She doesn't, he agreed, smiling. 2 years ago, right here, you put this ring on my finger and said I belonged. Last summer, on a rooftop under that same summer sky, we got married. Officiated by Imani, catered by Ms. Paulette's jerk chicken and my still terrible kimchi. Laughter. And 6 months ago, he paused, throat tightening. My mother visited for the first time, walked these halls, read the letters, met the people who saved her grandfather-in-law, She didn't apologize, but she stayed for dinner, and she came back. Heejin, in the front row now, upright but softer around the eyes, nodded once. Selena squeezed his hand. "Your turn," she whispered. He looked around the circle. The memory no one asked about. Last Christmas Eve, after everyone left, Selena and I sat right here on these steps, snow falling. And I finally told her about the last words my brother said to me before that missed call. Silence. Profound. He said, "Hyung, you're going to build an empire and realize too late it's empty." And Junseo's voice cracked. He was right, but sitting here with all of you, I realized something else. Empires fall, but communities, they remember, they endure, they choose each other. Applause swelled, fierce and familial. Ms. Paulette started, "This little light of mine." And the circle joined, voices blending Caribbean gospel, Korean hymns, Spanish ballads, English spirituals into something new and unbreakable. Later, after cleanup, Selena and Junseo slipped to the basement archive, their sanctuary. The Kang file now held new additions: wedding photos, foundation charters, letters from sister archives nationwide. But at the center, framed under glass, Kang Hyun-woo's 1952 letters, with a plaque reading, "Kang Hyun-woo," remembered for who he chose to be, not who he was supposed to be. Junseo traced the frame. "We finished the story." Selena leaned into him. "We started a better one." Upstairs, lights blinked on faces of every color, age, origin, all gathered in a building that had almost vanished. Outside, snow continued falling, soft and clean. In the quiet basement, surrounded by voices refusing silence, two people who'd found each other through grief discovered joy, earned through choices, witnessed by community, rooted in memory. "Merry Christmas," Selena whispered. "Merry Christmas," Junseo replied, kissing her temple. "Thank you for bringing me home." They proved mature love doesn't save. It transforms. Memory outlasts empires. The hardest battles aren't fought alone, but witnessed, shared, remembered. If this story touched the part of you that believes people can change when given space to remember who they truly are, subscribe for more romances that honor intelligence, heart, and the quiet revolutions of chosen belonging.